Chapter 27. While the Abbe Duplanty was persuading Pons to engage Madame Cantinet as his nurse, Fraisier had sent for her. He had plied the beadle's wife with sophistical reasoning and subtlety. It was difficult to resist his corrupting influence. And as for Madame Cantinet, a lean, sallow woman with large teeth and thin lips, her intelligence, as so often happens with women of the people, had been blunted by a hard life, till she had come to look upon the slenderest daily wage as prosperity. She soon consented to take Madame Sauvage with her as general servant. Madame Sauvage had had her instructions already. She had undertaken to weave a web of iron wire about the two musicians, and to watch them as a spider watches a fly caught in the toils, and her reward was to be a tobacconist's license. Fraisier had found a convenient opportunity of getting rid of his so-called foster mother, while he posted her as a detective and policeman to supervise Madame Cantinet. As there was a servant's bedroom and a little kitchen included in the apartment, La Sauvage could sleep on a truckle bed and cook for the German. Dr. Poulain came with the two women just as Pons drew his last breath. Schmucke was sitting beside his friend, all unconscious of the crisis, holding the hand that slowly grew colder in his grasp. He signed to Madame Cantinet to be silent, but Madame Sauvage's soldierly figure surprised him so much that he started in spite of himself, a kind of homage to which the virago was quite accustomed. "Monsieur Duplanty answers for this lady," whispered Madame Cantinet by way of introduction. "She once was cook to a bishop. She is honesty itself. She will do the cooking." "Oh, you may talk out loud," wheezed the stalwart dame. "The poor gentleman is dead. He has just gone." A shrill cry broke from Schmucke. He felt Pons's cold hand stiffening in his, and sat staring into his friend's eyes. The look in them would have driven him mad if Madame Sauvage, doubtless accustomed to scenes of this sort, had not come to the bedside with a mirror which she held over the lips of the dead. When she saw that there was no mist upon the surface, she briskly snatched Schmucke's hand away. "Just take away your hand, sir. You may not be able to do it in a little while. You do not know how the bones harden. A corpse grows cold very quickly. If you do not lay out a body while it is warm, you have to break the joints later on." And so it was this terrible woman who closed the poor dead musician's eyes. With a businesslike dexterity acquired in 10 years of experience, she stripped and straightened the body, laid the arms by the sides, and covered the face with the bedclothes, exactly as a shopman wraps a parcel. "A sheet will be wanted to lay him out. Where is there a sheet?" she demanded, turning on the terror-stricken Schmucke. He had watched the religious ritual, with its deep reverence for the creature made for such high destinies in heaven, and now he saw his dead friend treated simply as a thing in this packing process, saw with the sharp pain that dissolves the very elements of thought. "Do as you will," he answered mechanically. The innocent creature for the first time in his life had seen a man die, and that man was Pons, his only friend, the one human being who understood him and loved him. "I will go and ask Madame Cibot where the sheets are kept," said La Sauvage. "A truckle bed will be wanted for the person to sleep upon," Madame Cantinet came to tell Schmucke. Schmucke nodded and broke out into weeping. Madame Cantinet left the unhappy man in peace, but an hour later she came back to say, "Have you any money, sir, to pay for the things?" The look that Schmucke gave Madame Cantinet would have disarmed the fiercest hate. It was the white, blank, peaked face of death that he turned upon her, as an explanation that met everything. "Take it all and leave me to mine prayers and tears," he said, and knelt. Madame Sauvage went to Fraisier with the news of Pons's death. Fraisier took a cab and went to the Presidente. To-morrow she must give him the power of attorney to enable him to act for the heirs. Another hour went by, and Mme. Cantinet came again to Schmucke. "I have been to Mme. Cibot, sir, who knows all about things here," she said. "I asked her to tell me where everything is kept, but she almost jawed me to death with her abuse. Sir, do listen to me." Schmucke looked up at the woman, and she went on, innocent of any barbarous intention, for women of her class are accustomed to take the worst of moral suffering passively, as a matter of course. "We must have linen for the shroud, sir. We must have money to buy a truckle bed for the person to sleep upon, and some things for the kitchen, plates and dishes and glasses, for a priest will be coming to pass the night here, and the person says that there is absolutely nothing in the kitchen." "And what is more, sir, I must have coal and firing if I am to get the dinner ready," echoed La Sauvage, "and not a thing can I find. Not that there is anything so very surprising in that, as La Cibot used to do everything for you." Schmucke lay at the feet of the dead. He heard nothing, knew nothing, saw nothing. Mme. Cantinet pointed to him. "My dear woman, you would not believe me," she said. "Whatever you say, he does not answer." "Very well, child," said La Sauvage. "Now I will show you what to do in a case of this kind." She looked round the room as a thief looks in search of possible hiding places for money. Then she went straight to Pons' chest, opened the first drawer, saw the bag in which Schmucke had put the rest of the money after the sale of the pictures, and held it up before him. He nodded mechanically. "Here is money, child," said La Sauvage, turning to Mme. Cantinet. "I will count it first, and take enough to buy everything we want. Wine, provisions, wax candles, all sorts of things, in fact, for there is nothing in the house. Just look in the drawers for a sheet to bury him in. I certainly was told that the poor gentleman was simple, but I don't know what he is. He is worse. He is like a newborn child. We shall have to feed him with a funnel." The women went about their work, and Schmucke looked on precisely as an idiot might have done, broken down with sorrow, wholly absorbed in a half cataleptic state. He could not take his eyes from the face that seemed to fascinate him, Pons' face refined by the absolute repose of death. Schmucke hoped to die. Everything was alike indifferent. If the room had been on fire, he would not have stirred. "There are 1,250 francs here," La Sauvage told him. Schmucke shrugged his shoulders. But when La Sauvage came near to measure the body by laying the sheet over it before cutting out the shroud, a horrible struggle ensued between her and the poor German. Schmucke was furious. He behaved like a dog that watches by his dead master's body and shows his teeth at all who try to touch it. La Sauvage grew impatient. She grasped him, set him in the armchair, and held him down with Herculean strength. "Go on, child, sew him in his shroud," she said, turning to Mme. Cantinet. As soon as this operation was completed, La Sauvage set Schmucke back in his place at the foot of the bed. "Do you understand?" said she. "The poor dead man lying there must be done up. There is no help for it." Schmucke began to cry. The women left him and took possession of the kitchen, whither they brought all the necessaries in a very short time. La Sauvage made out a preliminary statement accounting for 360 francs, and then proceeded to prepare a dinner for 4 persons. And what a dinner! A fat goose, the cobbler's pheasant, by way of a substantial roast, an omelette with preserves, a salad, and the inevitable broth, the quantities of the ingredients for this last being so excessive that the soup was more like a strong meat jelly. At 9 o'clock the priest, sent by the curate to watch by the dead, came in with Cantinet, who brought 4 tall wax candles and some tapers. In the death chamber, Schmucke was lying with his arms about the body of his friend, holding him in a tight clasp. Nothing but the authority of religion availed to separate him from his dead. Then the priest settled himself comfortably in the easy chair, and read his prayers, while Schmucke, kneeling beside the couch, besought God to work a miracle and unite him to Pons, so that they might be buried in the same grave. And Madame Cantinet went on her way to the temple to buy a pallet and complete bedding for Madame Sauvage. The 1,250 francs were regarded as plunder. At 11 o'clock, Madame Cantinet came in to ask if Schmucke would not eat a morsel, but with a gesture he signified that he wished to be left in peace. "Your supper is ready, Monsieur Pastelot," she said, addressing the priest, and they went. Schmucke, left alone in the room, smiled to himself like a madman free at last to gratify a desire like the longing of pregnancy. He flung himself down beside Pons, and yet again he held his friend in a long, close embrace. At midnight the priest came back and scolded him, and Schmucke returned to his prayers. At daybreak the priest went, and at 7 o'clock in the morning the doctor came to see Schmucke, and spoke kindly, and tried hard to persuade him to eat, but the German refused. "If you do not eat now, you will feel very hungry when you come back," the doctor told him, "for you must go to the mayor's office and take a witness with you, so that the registrar may issue a certificate of death." "I must go!" cried Schmucke in frightened tones. "Who else? You must go, for you were the one person who saw him die." "Mein legs will nicht carry me," pleaded Schmucke, imploring the doctor to come to the rescue. "Take a cab," the hypocritical doctor blandly suggested. "I have given notice already. Ask someone in the house to go with you. The two women will look after the place while you are away." No one imagines how the requirements of the law jar upon a heartfelt sorrow. The thought of it is enough to make one turn from civilization and choose rather the customs of the savage. At 9 o'clock that morning, Madame Sauvage half carried Schmucke downstairs, and from the cab he was obliged to beg Remonencq to come with him to the registrar as a second witness. Here in Paris, in this land of ours besotted with equality, the inequality of conditions is glaringly apparent everywhere and in everything. The immutable tendency of things peeps out even in the practical aspects of death. In well-to-do families, a relative, a friend, or a man of business spares the mourners these painful details. But in this, as in the matter of taxation, the whole burden falls heaviest upon the shoulders of the poor. "Ah, you have good reason to regret him," said Remonencq in answer to the poor martyr's moan. "He was a very good, a very honest man, and he has left a fine collection behind him. But, being a foreigner, sir, do you know that you are like to find yourself in a great predicament? For everybody says that Monsieur Pons left everything to you." Schmucke was not listening. He was sounding the dark depths of sorrow that border upon madness. There is such a thing as tetanus of the soul. "And you would do well to find someone, some man of business, to advise you and act for you," pursued Remonencq. "Ein man of business!" echoed Schmucke. "You will find that you will want some one to act for you. If I were you, I should take an experienced man, somebody well known to you in the quarter, a man you can trust. I always go to Tabareau myself for my bits of affairs; he is the bailiff. If you give his clerk power to act for you, you need not trouble yourself any further." Remonencq and La Cibot, prompted by Fraisier, had agreed beforehand to make a suggestion which stuck in Schmucke's memory. For there are times in our lives when grief, as it were, congeals the mind by arresting all its functions, and any chance impression made at such moments is retained by a frost-bound memory. Schmucke heard his companion with such a fixed, mindless stare that Remonencq said no more. "If he is always to be idiotic like this," thought Remonencq, "I might easily buy the whole bag of tricks up yonder for 100,000 francs, if it is really his. Here we are at the mayor's office, sir." Remonencq was obliged to take Schmucke out of the cab and to half carry him to the registrar's department, where a wedding party was assembled. Here they had to wait for their turn, for, by no very uncommon chance, the clerk had 5 or 6 certificates to make out that morning. And here it was appointed that poor Schmucke should suffer excruciating anguish. "Monsieur is Monsieur Schmucke?" remarked a person in a suit of black, reducing Schmucke to stupefaction by the mention of his name. He looked up with the same blank, unseeing eyes that he had turned upon Remonencq, who now interposed. "What do you want with him?" he said. "Just leave him in peace. You can plainly see that he is in trouble." "The gentleman has just lost his friend, and proposes, no doubt, to do honor to his memory, being, as he is, the sole heir. The gentleman, no doubt, will not haggle over it. He will buy a piece of ground outright for a grave, and as Monsieur Pons was such a lover of the arts, it would be a great pity not to put music, painting, and sculpture on his tomb, 3 handsome full-length figures, weeping." Remonencq waved the speaker away in Auvergnat fashion, but the man replied with another gesture, which, being interpreted, means "Don't spoil sport," a piece of commercial freemasonry, as it were, which the dealer understood. "I represent the firm of Sonnet and Company, monumental stone masons. Sir Walter Scott would have dubbed me Young Mortality," continued this person. "If you, sir, should decide to entrust your orders to us, we would spare you the trouble of the journey to purchase the ground necessary for the interment of a friend lost to the arts." At this Remonencq nodded assent, and jogged Schmucke's elbow. "Every day we receive orders from families to arrange all formalities," continued he of the black coat, thus encouraged by Remonencq. "In the first moment of bereavement, the heir at law finds it very difficult to attend to such matters, and we are accustomed to perform these little services for our clients. Our charges, sir, are on a fixed scale, so much per foot, freestone or marble. Family vaults a specialty. We undertake everything at the most moderate prices. Our firm executed the magnificent monument erected to the fair Esther Gobseck at Lucien de Rubempré, one of the finest ornaments of Père Lachaise. We only employ the best workmen, and I must warn you, sir, against small contractors, who turn out nothing but trash," he added, seeing that another person in a black suit was coming up to say a word for another firm of marble workers. It is often said that death is the end of a journey, but the aptness of the simile is realized most fully in Paris. Any arrival, especially of a person of condition, upon the dark brink, is hailed in much the same way as the traveller recently landed is hailed by hotel touts and pestered with their recommendations. With the exception of a few philosophically minded persons, or here and there a family secure of handing down a name to posterity, nobody thinks beforehand of the practical aspects of death. Death always comes before he is expected, and, from a sentiment easy to understand, the heirs usually act as if the event were impossible. For which reason, almost every one that loses father or mother, wife or child, is immediately beset by scouts that profit by the confusion caused by grief to snare others. In former days, agents for monuments used to live round about the famous cemetery of Père Lachaise, and were gathered together in a single thoroughfare, which should by rights have been called the Street of Tombs. Issuing thence, they fell upon the relatives of the dead as they came from the cemetery, or even at the graveside. But competition and the spirit of speculation induced them to spread themselves further and further afield, till, descending into Paris itself, they reached the very precincts of the mayor's office. Indeed, the stonemason's agent has often been known to invade the house of mourning, with a design for the sepulchre in his hand. "I am in treaty with this gentleman," said the representative of the firm of Sonnet to another agent who came up. "Pons deceased," called the clerk at this moment. "Where are the witnesses?" "This way, sir," said the stonemason's agent, this time addressing Remonencq. Schmucke stayed where he had been placed on the bench, an inert mass. Remonencq begged the agent to help him, and together they pulled Schmucke towards the balustrade, behind which the registrar shelters himself from the mourning public. Remonencq, Schmucke's providence, was assisted by Dr. Poulain, who filled in the necessary information as to Pons's age and birthplace. The German knew but one thing, that Pons was his friend. So soon as the signatures were affixed, Remonencq and the doctor, followed by the stonemason's man, put Schmucke into a cab, the desperate agent whisking in afterwards, bent upon taking a definite order. La Sauvage, on the lookout in the gateway, half carried Schmucke's almost unconscious form upstairs. Remonencq and the agent went up with her. "He will be ill!" exclaimed the agent, anxious to make an end of the piece of business which, according to him, was in progress. "I should think he will," returned Mme. Sauvage. "He has been crying for 24 hours on end, and he would not take anything. There is nothing like grief for giving one a sinking in the stomach." "My dear client," urged the representative of the firm of Sonnet, "do take some broth. You have so much to do. Some one must go to the Hôtel de Ville to buy the ground in the cemetery on which you mean to erect a monument to perpetuate the memory of the friend of the arts, and bear record to your gratitude." "Why, there is no sense in this," added Mme. Cantinet, coming in with broth and bread. "If you are as weak as this, you ought to think of finding some one to act for you," added Remonencq, "for you have a good deal on your hands, my dear sir. There is the funeral to order; you would not have your friend buried like a pauper." "Come, come, my dear sir," put in La Sauvage, seizing a moment when Schmucke laid his head back in the great chair, to pour a spoonful of soup into his mouth. She fed him as if he had been a child, and almost in spite of himself. "Now, if you were wise, sir, since you are inclined to give yourself up quietly to grief, you would find some one to act for you. As you are thinking of raising a magnificent monument to the memory of your friend, sir, you have only to leave it all to me. I will undertake—" "What is all this? What is all this?" asked La Sauvage. "Has Monsieur Schmucke ordered something? Who may you be?" "I represent the firm of Sonnet, my dear madame, the biggest monumental stonemasons in Paris," said the person in black, handing a business card to the stalwart Sauvage. "Very well, that will do. Some one will go with you when the time comes, but you must not take advantage of the gentleman's condition now. You can quite see that he is not himself." The agent led her out upon the landing. "If you will undertake to get the order for us," he said confidentially, "I am empowered to offer you 40 francs." Mme. Sauvage grew placable. "Very well, let me have your address," said she. Schmucke, meantime, being left to himself, and feeling the stronger for the soup and bread that he had been forced to swallow, returned at once to Pons's rooms and to his prayers. He had lost himself in the fathomless depths of sorrow, when a voice, sounding in his ears, drew him back from the abyss of grief, and a young man in a suit of black returned for the 11th time to the charge, pulling the poor tortured victim's coat sleeve until he listened. "Sir," said he. "What is it now?" "Sir, we owe a supreme discovery to Dr. Ganal. We do not dispute his fame. He has worked miracles of Egypt afresh, but there have been improvements made upon his system. We have obtained surprising results. So, if you would like to see your friend again as he was when he was alive—" "See him again?" cried Schmucke. "Shall he speak to me?" "Not exactly. Speech is the only thing wanting," continued the embalmer's agent. "But he will remain as he is after embalming for all eternity. The operation is over in a few seconds, just an incision in the carotid artery and an injection. But it is high time. If you wait one single quarter of an hour, sir, you will not have the sweet satisfaction of preserving the body." "Go to der Teufel! Bons is ein spirit, und that spirit is in heaven." "That man has no gratitude in his composition," remarked the youthful agent of one of the famous Ganal's rivals. "He will not embalm his friend." The words were spoken under the archway, and addressed to La Cibot, who had just submitted her beloved to the process. "What would you have, sir?" she said. "He is the heir, the universal legatee. As soon as they get what they want, the dead are nothing to them."